Hello, 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 and welcome to another live coaching. I'm broadcasting from Maui, and I want to know, did you sail this week? Did you sail this week? Where are you? Say hello in the chat. I want to know what's going on in your windsurfing world. Where are you? What's going on? Did you sail this week? We are live. We're live. I'm going to get into the coaching in a minute. We're going to get into the Facebook group. There's some good questions, but we're going to wait a few minutes for people to show up. We're going to wait a few minutes for people to show up. So, all right, let's see. Can I upload some of my footage from, let me see if I can upload some of my footage from this week. I had a really good session yesterday, but there was no one filming, so I don't have any footage from it, which is all good. All right, let's see if this works. No, that doesn't work. I don't think I can share my footage how I normally would. Yep. All right. So I don't think it works to share like that. I am going to. Yeah, I tried to get it uploaded. I guess it's still processing. Takes longer than I expected. Anyway, I had a really interesting session earlier in the week where it's was kind of tricky conditions and but pretty good, and I was struggling a little bit in the beginning, and it took me a while to get into the rhythm. And then something that I realized when I came in, so I was slipping a bit on my cutbacks, and this is a board that I've had for 8 years, 9 years. It's an old board. It's not a new board. I've had it for the board that I've used more than any other board in my whole windsurfing life. It is by far the best board I've ever had, and it's that white one. You'll see it in a lot of videos and pictures from Hokipa. And um, yeah, I realized that my fins were not how I normally set them up. I don't know how it happened, and I'm always telling you guys to play with your fins, check your fins. Normally, what I do is if I'm riding somewhere down the line, I'm riding a thruster, and I'll set the side fins asymmetrically. So I'll put a smaller gap fin and the rear fin, and a bigger gap between the cutback fin and the rear fin. And the reason I do that is I like having the opportunity to do a snappy little bottom turn, and I really want the rail to hold on the cutbacks. I don't like the feeling of the tail sliding out in the cutbacks. And anyway, so I was sliding a bit more in the cutbacks than I like. I don't like that instability, especially on the lip. I really want that feel of the rail gripping. And why is this going on? I thought it was something with me. I thought it was something with the board. But then I turned it over to check the fins, and my fins were both quite close to the rear fin. So the cutback fin was the same distance from the bottom turn fin. And so then I moved the cutback fin up a centimeter. The next session was awesome. And I had exactly everything that I wanted out of uh, a cutback rail hold. So I don't know what the lesson is, except just to always be paying attention to your gear. It matters so much. It matters so much. Even if you think that you found the perfect setup and it's the board you always use, it can change. Like maybe I hit a little rock and it knocked the fin back. Maybe when I was changing fins, I was going too fast and I made a mistake, and I just made a mistake setting it up wrong. Whatever the situation was, um, yeah, it was in the wrong place for how I like to ride that board. Even though it's my favorite board, it's the board I use the most. All right, let's get to the chat. We got Jorg saying sub 0 degrees, no sailing. We got Andre as well. Hello, hello. Gianluca, ciao. We got Tomas, who's back from Cape Town to Europe, and time to plan another trip. We got Mark as well. Sounds like it's very cold in Northern Europe. The water is frozen. We got Suna as well. Winter weather. This is the state of Europe, I guess. Gianluca, not in Northern Europe, had a 6 session in Tenerife. We got Ragnar on the ice. Nice. Um, Tomas is saying maybe my kids messed up my board with the screwdriver. We got Harold leaving to Tenerife next Saturday. Awesome. That sounds fun. Um, yeah, cool. Cool, cool, cool. All right, let's get the Facebook group loaded up. I want to show you guys my session. I've got to see if I can get that loaded up. Yeah, maybe. Does this work? Does this work? We've got a little spinning wheel. Uh, Maybe, maybe not. Look at, there's a few things from this session that are worth talking about. Here we go. It's working. Maybe. Maybe, maybe, maybe. All right. Okay, so that is an example. Let's go back to that. So this is an example of the board coming out of the water in a way that I don't like, and is something that was fixed by moving the fins. So here, let's watch this again. So this is a session from this week, which, by the way, I had an awesome session yesterday as well. There's been some good days. So like that example. So if you're, it's a pretty subtle thing, but I really don't like the fins coming out like that. So here, let's watch it again. So if you're looking, oh yeah, there we go. For some reason, I don't have great control over the video player with this format. So let's just watch it and see how it goes. And then this 360, my foot came out, so I fell, and then it was in my head. I was like, oh, I need to land a 360 because I was so frustrated because the foot came out with that one. And then I ended up screwing up a few waves because I was trying to force a wave 360. And I think there's a lesson in this somewhere, which is that it's really important to read the wave and not to project onto the wave. This is something I've said before, but I probably don't say enough. One of the most important things with riding waves is that you're reading what the wave is allowing you to do, not projecting onto it. And so, like, I got into my head, oh, I want to do a 360, and I was pushing 360s in sections that were not 360 sessions, and it kind of screwed up this part of my session. That was a little floater. I think floaters are really fun and something that almost everyone should try if you feel comfortable to go for it. So there's an example again of kind of forcing the 360 and yeah, kind of screwing up that part of my session. It's been also not very windy on Maui, even though we've had some great days. So the days that are windy are amazing, but we haven't had a lot of windy days. And so I'm rustier than I normally would be. And something that I see when I watch my own footage is I'm not getting low enough. So if you've been in any of my coaching, you know, get low before you go is one of the main mantras. And I need to be doing more of that. And so after I watched this footage, then I was really paying attention to getting low before I go. And that combined with changing the fin on the cutback side, huge difference in how I felt on the performance. So yeah, get low before you go and pay attention to your gear. Pay attention to your gear. The gear is so important in our sport, so important, and moving the fins a centimeter can make a huge difference for how everything feels, how everything performs, whether you're getting speed and projection or not. Um, yeah, this this was when my session really started to turn on. So I don't have footage from the whole session because the filmer couldn't stay the whole time. But I started to find a rhythm at this point, and then it got better and better as the day went on. I find that that can happen often, where it starts off maybe a little bit funky, and then I start to get into a rhythm. And I think it's important to be aware of that so that you're not maybe quitting too early if you feel like you're not having the best day. Um, anyway, I wonder if you guys have any questions about this footage. It's almost done. If you have questions about my footage, now is the time to put it in the chat. And otherwise, we're going to load up the Facebook group and get into the questions from the day. Um, yeah, and then yeah, I had a really a good session yesterday, but there's no footage from it. I think this is the end of this footage. I remember this wave. I caught this wave and I thought, oh, it looks like a nice wave, but there's nothing down the bottom. It's just this one peak, and then it started to disappear into a shoulder. Um, and yeah, it was around this point that the filmer had to go. Maybe we've got one more wave in here. So this is your last chance to ask a question. I've got one more interesting thing to say about this footage, and this came up in actually the private coaching that I've been doing with one of the members of the community. And so, also, if you want to do private coaching, we can do private coaching via Zoom, and I think it works pretty well. Uh, we've had some pretty good sessions. So, about wave selection. Wave selection is less about the waves that you pick and more about the waves that you don't pick. Or to say it more eloquently, wave selection is less about the waves you jibe onto and more about the waves that you jibe off of or tack off of. So, like in that example, I'm checking out this wave. I see that it doesn't look right and I get off it. And this is, I think, what really separates the pros from the amateurs is after you're on a wave and it doesn't look right, instead of just riding that wave because you're on it, jibing off it, tacking off it, being more selective because it takes a lot of time riding a wave all the way in instead of just tacking off it and trying to get another one. So a lot of improving your wave selection is about jibing off of more waves. So it's not about taking fewer waves or taking different waves, though that could also be part of it. It's more about really being aware if the wave that you've chosen is going to close out or it's too small or there's something wrong with it, then you get off of it. So being aware of those choices and then yeah, getting off the wave. So getting off the wave is actually more important than getting on the wave when you're trying to select waves. So is that clear? Is that interesting? Let me know. We got a question from Tomas who says, how would you describe a full top turn when you almost go to backside? Like, is it rail to rail? But what is the key for me? I like to think about just staying on that rail. So it's less about going rail to rail. It's more about coming out of the bottom turn into a carving cut back, which I guess you could say is rail to rail, but that's a less important part of it for me. The more important part is really carving hard on that cutback rail and continuing that turn and not letting go of the turn until the board is all the way around to the other whitewater. And you need a specific setup for that. So if your fins are too stiff, if your board rocker is too flat, it's not going to work as well for doing those carving roundhouse cutbacks. I love those round cutbacks that go all the way back to the whitewater like a backside. And I find that they're really dependent on gear and having the gear tuned the right way. So You want to make sure you've got soft enough fins. The Ezzy four fins are really good for those kind of carves. A fin that's too stiff isn't going to allow the board to carve. It's going to want to release and slide. And a board that has too straight of a rocker also. All right, so let's roll into the Facebook group. You can post your questions in the chat. Of course, I read them all and answer them here. If you're joining us, let us know, did you sail this week? And yeah, what's going on in your windsurfing life? So we got a question from Harold. What are other spots to discover in Tenerife other than El Medano, and when do they work? This is a great question, and I don't have a really good answer. Because mostly Tenerife is El Medano. So you have Cabezo, and you have the spot above Cabezo, and you have the bay. There are different spots in El Medano, but if you're getting out of El Medano, there are some other spots. People will go to maybe Las Americas or some of the other places, but it takes really specific conditions, and they're a lot trickier places. So I would say that most of the windsurfing is in El Medano, but you have different spots in El Medano. So you have Cabeza, which is the main pro attraction, and it's got a tricky launch, and it's got Godzilla, which is the big rock. But it's not as hard as I think people make it out to be. So it's tricky, but it's not so tricky. Um, and the so that's Cabezo. Then there's a spot just upwind of Cabezo, which is maybe a little bit easier. And then if you go downwind from Cabezo, you've got there's like a little point, and the waves wrap around that point, and that is probably the best spot for learning wave riding and jumping. It's just in front of the harbor. It's just in front. There's like a little harbor wall, and it's just in front of that on the point. And either you want to sail upwind from Cabezo Bay or downwind. Um, upwind from El Medano Bay or downwind from Cabezo. But that spot's probably the best. And then the bay in Cabezo is also pretty good for free riding, and it can be good for wave riding also. We got a comment here from Andre that there's some wave spots in the north of Tenerife. Yes, but those are pretty hardcore. We've got a question from Gianluca. He says he has a video from yesterday similar to the first video. Sent it on Messenger. Are you in the Facebook group? Because if you are in the Facebook group, then the easiest is just to post it in there. Yeah, post it in the Facebook group, and then let us know in the chat once you've done that, and we'll get to it. Yeah, post it in the Facebook group. So Harold, the nice thing with El Medano is everything is pretty close and tight, and so you can see what's going on. You can see if it's windy. You can see what the conditions look like. Like I said, the harbor wall is probably the best place for working on your wave riding and your jumping. Cabezo is the main pro spot, but it is more difficult in terms of the launch and the rocks. But it's not outside the realm of possible for most people. But it is more difficult. Harbor wall, great spot for improving. And then the bay is also good as well. Okay, we got a post from Julius. He's working on his Shakas. I don't know why this full screen seems to stop. It doesn't work anymore. So Julius is Shakas, and he's having trouble sliding them. So he's getting the rotation, which I would say is probably the hardest part. And the big change that needs to happen is taking off downwind. So Julius is taking off very upwind. Now, this is a very advanced maneuver, uh, but he's taking off very upwind. In fact, you want to take off going downwind and traveling downwind. And so I'm not as experienced with the flat water version. I do them mainly on the still doesn't work on the wave. So I wonder if I can play this. It'll be small, but I guess you guys can see it. So I'm used to doing them on the wave, and it's a bit of a different motion. But as you can see, even on the wave, I'm traveling downwind, right? So I'm taking off and I'm traveling downwind. I'm not traveling upwind, even though I'm spinning upwind. Here's another example from Hokipa. So see the travel Maybe not. Maybe downwind is misleading, because even though it does, sometimes you can really do it downwind. Maybe the feeling is more like traveling forward rather than doing an arc up into the wind. Uh, but the shaka is a very advanced maneuver. I love the discussion here in this post. If you're working on shakas, let us know. Here's a video I posted on the same page you guys have already seen. Uh, yeah, just some of the high. And that's my old board. I love that board. Jeff says that he feels a direct crossover while supping. He's been listening to a lot of old coaching videos from this group, and without thinking about it, he started bending at the waist. I love it. So we talk about hinging at the hips, super important. Hinge at the hips, getting really low and getting some very good board angles on the bottom turns. Um, and it was interesting. By shortening his body, it allowed to put the board at a much steeper angle without falling forward. He never really thought about this. Intuitively, it seems like you could get more pressure on the rail by standing taller, but by lowering his center of gravity, he could get much deeper angle without tipping over. It gives him something to work on this winter, which will help cross over to windsurfing. Awesome. Yeah, and Jeff has been a member of this group since very early on, and we've been working on his wave riding for a long time, and I really was impressed watching him on Maui in October. He was on Maui in October, and yeah, love it. All right, so adjustable harness lines. I think we're caught up. We talked about adjustable harness lines last week. So again, short week. It's freezing cold in Northern Europe, where most of you guys are. But Gianluca, did you manage to post your video from Tenerife in the group? Um, Otherwise, let's see. So in general, I want it posted in the group. Let's see, not in direct messages, but let's see. Um, So Gianluca says he loses the grip on the fins, but mostly he struggles understanding what he's supposed to do with the sail. Always too close to the boom while doing the cutback and kind of hanging. Uh, Probably this has been said already, but he didn't have a chance to look through the other streams. Yeah, that's fine. It's really not a problem to ask questions that have already been asked before, because there's so much to say about all of these topics. So first of all, where is this? You said this is Tenerife? Looks like beautiful down the line starboard tack. Looks like Maui. Looks like Hokipa. Good effort. All right, let's dissect this. So getting low, leaning forward, pushing the sail away, hinging at the hips, hinging at the knees. We like to see this. Um, there's something a little bit funky going on here with where you're aiming. So I like a lot of the mechanics that are happening here, but you're aiming very far down the line. I would like to see you aim to do more of a U-shaped bottom turn. So the moment this bottom turn is almost like a straight line. There's very little curve in it, right? Like you come down the wave, you're into the bottom turn. If we watch the trajectory, right, it's going like this. It's like a line. Um, like a line. Again, it's kind of like a line, and then there's a little bit of curve right at the very end here, but very little. Like it's this. This is the curve, like what I'm circling, right? Like until this point, it was a straight line, and we want to think about doing more of a U-shaped bottom turn, and that can be a big U, but we still want it to be a U, and that will help also with the cutback. The bottom turn is your job. The bottom turn is your job. The cutback is mostly the wave's job and the bottom turn's job. So if you set yourself up correctly in the bottom turn, the cutback is going to work itself out. And if you are not coming back up the wave, if you're not doing that U, then you have a lot of sail power and a lot of energy going across the wave, that sort of transverse energy. And that is going to make it a lot harder for the rail to stay engaged on the wave. Whereas if you're doing more of a U-shaped bottom turn, then one, you're coming back up against the power of the wave so that your force vector, speed vector, direct, all of that, all of your energy is going against the energy of the wave, which makes it a lot easier than to push against that wall of water and to keep the rail engaged. Also, just the mechanics of the sail, if you come up more vertically, more complete in your bottom turn, the sail is going to be more neutral. So a straighter bottom turn, not only are you going across the wave, so you don't have anything to push against, because think of it, if you're going back up the wave, you have that whole wall of water coming at you that you can push against. Whereas if you're going across it, you don't have much to push against, right? You the fins are going to slip out. There's not a lot of power pushing against you, um, right? Which is why we get turns that look like that. But a lot of the fundamentals are looking really good here. One other thing, I see, Gianluca, you've asked a question in the chat. I'm going to get to that in a second. There's a lot of back foot pressure, a lot of back foot pressure. How do we change that? Change that by changing where your hips are pointing. So right now your hips, as you get into the turn, are pointing towards the nose of the board. Can you see that? Is that clear? Is that clear to everyone? So the hips are pointing really forward towards the nose of the board. You want those hips to be pointed towards your toes, towards the rail, and that will force this leg to be more bent, will force more equal pressure on both of your feet. So getting those hips pointed towards the toes, so you have everything parallel. You've got the hips pointing in the same direction as the knees, in the same direction as the toes. So those are all pointing in a line, and that will help with more equal-footed pressure. Okay, so we got a question from Gianluca. He says, how do I turn tighter without losing speed? More pressure on the back foot or more leaning inside? So definitely not more pressure on the back foot, because you're already putting a ton of pressure on the back foot. And the little dirty answer to it is it's all about where you aim. And so right now with your head, you're looking way down here. And if instead you're looking up here, then you're going to do a turn that's much tighter. It's a lot about where you're aiming. Getting the feet more equal pressured will also help with carrying speed, because you're not going to be sinking the tail as much. So you're going to be more forward on the rail. You're going to carry more speed. That said, I'm not trying to be critical of this. I really like this wave ride. It's more about, okay, how do we get it even better? Another thing that you can do if you feel like you don't have enough space, and this is not, it really depends on the situation, but like in this specific situation where you're dropping in, you could come a little bit farther in front of the wave, and that gives you then a little bit more space to come back up the wave, so you can go more vertically. But it's a lot about where you're looking with your head. So instead of looking down here, if you're looking up here, you're going to go up there. The two main things I would say to work on are getting the hips turned into the turn, and then looking at a place closer to you for doing your cutback. And then let's look at the cutback and see if there's anything else in this of a cutback, because so far we've been mainly just talking about the bottom turn. You're moving the sail across the body. Great job. You're pulling in the sail. So that's another issue, which also makes the fins slide. So in general, you don't want to pull in the sail. You want to feel more like you're hanging from the sail. More like you're hanging from the sail. So we've got a couple questions. I'm going to get to those. So we've got Luke saying, in this situation, how do you lay down the sail versus open it up? We've got H in the chat. It's been a while. Good to hear from you. You are in Fuerte. I have not been there. I've heard it's great. I want to go. When? I don't know. I have been to Fuerte. It's not true. I haven't been to Fuerte, but I've been to the south. I've been to the south, and I assume that you're in the north getting good waves. So H is saying less power with the sail. So here's a question from Luke, whether you open up the sail or whether you lie it down. My answer is it doesn't really matter. That the main thing is you want the sail pushed away from you in the bottom turn. Getting this twisted position, if it's side shore, is not something you need to do. You can keep it more in front of you, but you don't want to worry too much about laying down the sail, not laying down the sail. It's just a lot about pushing it away from you. Uh, and this twisted position is great in onshore, but if it's more side shore like this looks, you can keep the sail more in front of you, and that will be in a more laid down position. I wonder if I can pull up. Let me see if I can pull up the video, the other video that we had, my Hokipa video. It's maybe better in here. I think there's a comeback in here. No, that's a taco. I want to show an example. Okay, so there's one. Oh, I can't go frame by frame on this. So here's an example of a cutback, and what I want you to pay attention to is how much I'm pulling on the sail. So look at this position going into it. I'm kind of below the sail, keeping the sail open. I'm not sheeting in at all. The sail stays neutral, and when you pull in on the sail, when you sheet in, pull the sail to you, you're powering it up, which then pulls the board flat. You don't want the board to be flat. You want the board to stay on this rail, right? And so you're sort of sheeting out. I feel like I'm hanging from the boom. Some people don't feel like they're hanging from the boom. You're definitely not pulling in on it. Um, Here's an example of a little bottom turn. Again, not great. This isn't the best bottom turn I've ever done in my life. Um, I've got also a lot of back foot pressure. My hips are pointed towards the nose. There's a lot of things I could be doing differently here, but let's look at the cutback. Again, hanging from the boom, not pulling in the sail, getting the butt low. You don't want to stick your hips up. And then that allows the board to arc around. I hope that's clear. We talked a lot about the technical parts. But Gianluca looks good. Looks good. I hope that's clear. The main things I would say to work on are getting the hips pointed in the direction of the feet and looking with your head somewhere closer. Um, oh, it says I'm not sharing the video. Okay, here let's try that again then. I can show you what I was looking at just in this little video. Uh, so here on the cutbacks again, keeping the sail open, not pulling it in, keeping the butt low. Here's another one, keeping the sail open, butt low on that rail. Because if you sheet in here, you're pulling the board flat, and then it's off the rail. You don't want, right? You want to keep the butt low, sort of hang from the sail. You're getting this high five. Um, so anyway, hope that's clear. All right, we got a question from H saying, is there any experimentation with boards very low thickness like kite surfing, allowing less bounce, more carving? I was doing some experiments like this when I was a teenager. We were doing some really kind of crazy boards that had super thin rails, not quite as thin as a wakeboard, but very thin, very, very thin. And then it would, so you like, if this is the bottom of the board, you had your rail, and then it would go up and then to the deck. So you had like a cut in sort of. They worked great. They worked really well, but they're harder to make. I don't think you could make it in a production setting. And when I switched, at that time I was getting boards made by Richard Green, and then I switched to Quattro, and I was getting boards from them, and they couldn't do that with their setup. They couldn't make that kind of rail, so we didn't try it again. I brought it up with Fabian with Taboo, but they haven't been interested in doing stuff like that since. It'd be cool to do that again. I got to see if I can find someone that will is able to do that kind of rail. I'd love to make another board like that. All right, we got a question from Gianluca. I think this will be our last question. I'm going to sign off. Can you please explain more about the hanging on the sail? I'm not sure when I should do about to hit the wave. Yeah, so the hanging from the sail, some people don't find that a useful way of thinking about it. I find it useful. With all of these things, there's going to be some cues that work for you and some cues that don't. And the hanging from the sail, let me see if I can show an example that works. Yeah. Basically, you don't want to be speeding in. You don't want the sail above you. So, like, here's a little carving cutback. Look how low I'm getting. It's almost like I'm dropping my butt to the water and keeping the sail in the same place. It's super open. And this to me feels kind of like hanging from the sail. There's not a lot of weight on the sail though, because there's a lot of support from the board, right? So imagine you could do this also without a sail, like surfers cut. It's not like you're really supported by the sail. You're definitely not feeling yourself on the sail. It's more like you're really getting low, especially like on these kind of off the lips. You can see like I've got my straight arms, butt is low. And to me, that really feels like hanging from the sail because you're really trying to get that butt low. I think if you focus on getting the butt low and getting the heels dug in, because there's a lot about getting the butt low, the heels engaged, and that's what puts the board on the rail and puts it in that right high five position. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Post your questions, videos, comments, concerns, all of the above in the Facebook group. If you want to join one of our masterclasses this year, go to windsurfingmasterclass.com and find the schedule. There are spaces in Morocco and in Gran Canaria. You can sign up in the applications. And of course, post your videos, comments, questions, all of that in the Facebook group. I go through everything that's posted and I look forward